Good evening and welcome. I'm Sheila Balgobin and I am the Dream Decipherer, and I help you to crack the code of your sleep and dreams so you can sleep sound and dream deep. Well, this evening we've got vacationers, mafia bosses, and stilt walking going on. So let's dive right in and see what's going on here. The dreamer reports that they were with their spouse in the countryside of either a Latin American or a Latin European, I guess something like Italy or Spain, France, something like that, or even Romania. And they were driving towards a nearby town, a local town. And when they arrived, they went into a restaurant or bar that belonged to a local mafia boss. That's the first part of the dream. The next part of the dream, the dreamer reports that they were walking on stilts and pushing cake and tea along the floor of this bar or restaurant with a long, thin glass. Now, apparently, the boss of this place had an office, but it looked like a prison with bars across the entrance and an engraving written on the door, I guess, that said something along the lines like, "Beyond the point, the boss demands respect," or "Beyond this point, the boss demands respect." And the dreamer reports that they didn't actually enter this office. And the dream ends there. So it's quite short. But as we all know, when little dreams can contain lots of information, dreams are very good at compacting a lot of information into a short space or a short dream. So let's start picking it apart and see what we get here. Now, the first part, this about it being a Latin American country or a Latin country somewhere in Europe. My first question here is, what does Latin actually evoke for the dreamer? Is there something significant about the Latinness of this place that they were in? Now, the dreamer reports that they were in the countryside, so on a holiday, it would seem. But so there's something about relaxation, a holiday, taking a break, perhaps, someplace away from the usual places that the dreamer and the dreamer's partner may actually go. So my question here was, well, how does that make the uh, dreamer feel? To be out in the open in some place that's pleasant and I would imagine quite pretty, um, away from towns, away from, like I said, the usual humdrum life. So they're driving away from this relaxed place in the countryside, into the hustle and bustle of a nearby town. And how did the dreamer respond to that change? Was it expected? Was it desired? Or were they just hungry and needed to find some place to eat? But how did that change of environment actually impact the dreamer? Now they get to this restaurant or bar, which is seen apparently owned by a local mafioso. Um, and my first question was, well, why there? Was it the only place in town? Maybe it was a small town. Did it maybe it was crowded, which meant it was probably popular and the food was good. Um, weren't there other places that the dreamer could have gone that were less shady, in nature in terms of the ownership? But nevertheless, my question here for the dreamer was is there perhaps the implication of flirting with danger or the dark side? And is there something about that perhaps was appealing to the dreamer in some way? Or maybe it was just to collect a holiday story, something to tell the kids or grandkids or friends. Yeah, we hung out at this bar that was owned by a local mafia boss. Something for storytelling interest, perhaps. But what regarding this mafia boss, what does this mafia boss actually evoke for the dreamer, and how does that make the dreamer feel with regard to this person who obviously is very powerful, and it runs things, not just this restaurant, but probably runs a few other things in the town as well. Now we'll switch from there for a moment and to look at the second part of the dream, where the dreamer is actually walking on stilts. And the what came to me immediately is the Mako Jumbis, which in the Caribbean they're stilt walkers, which is actually goes back to Africa, but apparently in the 5th century of Greece they also had stilt walkers. So it's something that's been around for quite some time. But it's I know from personally from seeing the stilt walkers, they're quite incredible. They run, they jump, they do all kinds of acrobatics on these tall stilts. But what the deeper significance of them is that these are the people who are dressed in costume and walking on these stilts are embodying the spirits of ancestors, so that they dance at celebrations, whether they be weddings or funerals or initiation ceremonies of some kind, to literally bring in the energy of the ancestral spirits. Now, Mako Jumbis, these stilt walkers, were reported to kidnap disobedient children, steal the dreams of um, of people, and they are able to see into the hearts of evildoers and terrorize them. So they're pretty scary creatures. But these dancers, when they put on these costumes and walk and start walking on the stilts, they are no longer themselves. They become the literal embodiment of the spirits. And I just wonder if if the dreamer was figuratively dancing on stilts, in a sense to signifying that they were being elevated to ancestor status or spiritual status in some way. Now, the while on these stilts, the dreamer is pushing around their tea and cakes that they were having at this restaurant or bar with a long um, glass tube, it would seem. A long, thin glass is how it's described. And my question here is, was this a tube made of glass of some kind? What did it look like? And why? Well, I guess because he couldn't reach it, they were trying to, I don't know, grab it or get to it in some way. Was it a straw so they could drink the tea? Just kind of curious about why there was this stuff being pushed around on the floor. But the another meaning that could be associated with this glass is that it's glass is generally, unless it's colored glass, is transparent. It can be seen through. So there's something implied about clarity, or seeing things as they truly are, perhaps without any coloring in it. And my question here for the dreamer is there something, is the dreamer seeing something from above, i.e., on these stilts, at a higher perspective, but is nourishing themselves at a lower level because the stuff is on the floor? And I just wonder if there seems to be some kind of split or dichotomy between the higher perspective, but yet feeding on lower energy or low vibrational energy somehow. And perhaps that's something for the dreamer to think about. Then we get to the office of this mafia boss, I guess at the back of this restaurant or next to it, which looks like a prison, because of the bars across it. And my question here for the dreamer is, well, is there something about bosses, whether in waking life or in some other aspect of their life, that feels like a prison? Or is the dreamer actually feeling imprisoned in some way and stuck in their head about something or other? And then you get this interesting sign on the boss's door, which says that, at this point you have to show respect to the boss. In other words, local mafioso, you don't want to tick them off and get them upset and possibly end up sleeping with the fishes, as they say. But there's something deeper here that's implied, and it's about showing respect, when crossing a boundary, perhaps, or threshold into this boss's territory. Um, but the dreamer, interestingly enough, doesn't enter, refuses to enter, in fact, he says. And my question here is why? What was it about? I mean, was it just the fact that it looked like a prison that was the issue? But what was going on that made the dreamer decide that, nah, not for me, and not go in? My other question with regard to this office is, what did the dreamer feel upon reading this sign? Was it their fear or apprehension? Was there anger? Was there an actual lack of respect? What was going on there that the dreamer felt compelled to even want to go into this office that looked like a prison? Now, looking at the what seemingly two odd parts of this dream, I tried to pick it apart a bit more to find out what the possible connections between the two parts of the dream are. Now, the first part of the dream talks about Latin, or a Latin country, whether it was in South America or in Europe. Now, Latin as a language, one of the so-called classic or dead languages, is actually still not quite dead. It's moribund, maybe, but not totally dead, because it's still used in Latin cultures in Europe and in South America or Latin America, in the church. There are still priests that will pray in Latin. So there's a religious connotation, perhaps, that's being suggested by this dream, which is reinforced with a totally different spiritual tradition, that of the Mako Jumbis, or stilt walkers. And remember, as I said earlier, that the Mako Jumbis, when they don their masks and are standing on their stilts, they become the embodiment of the ancestral spirits, or spirits of some kind. So they're embodying a different reality. They're no longer themselves. They're not even referred to as, Joe Blow or whoever. They are the spirits that whose personas they have donned, if you will. And there's an implication that it's a celebration of the ancestors and asking for their blessings as well, since this dance, these Mako Jumbis are, they're invited to attend particular ceremonies that are meaningful to the community, whether they're weddings, funerals, initiation rites, what have you. And my question here for the dreamer is there some kind of split for the dreamer between this kind of higher spiritual self, which is as represented on the stilts, being at a high position and able to see things more in a more panoramic view, versus the day-to-day reality of like eating tea and having drinking tea and having cake? which was placed on the floor or maybe on a table, but it seems to be that it was actually on the floor. So there's this, again, this juxtaposition of higher versus lower. And I wonder if there's some kind of internal conflict or maybe external conflict for the dreamer with regard to their higher self and their lower everyday self. Now, picking up again on this theme of this perhaps of having some kind of spiritual or religious connotation in this dream, I just put to the dreamer that could this boss actually represent God in some way? I mean, some people do refer to God as the big boss. So, I just wonder if there is some kind of a spiritual issue or spiritual wrestling that's going on within the dreamer, because the dreamer turns away and doesn't enter the boss's office. Now, you could interpret that in more than one way. You could literally entering into the boss's office, could mean that you went to the spirit world, i.e., you die physically. But it can also mean that being called on the carpet for some reason, having being taken to task for something or other that's been done. And you have to show proper respect when you go to meet the boss, because the boss will basically kick your butt if you're not doing right. And I would ask the question here of the dreamer is whether there's some kind of conflict that may be going on between the dreamer's spiritual views and the boss's directives, whoever this boss is. If we're assuming that for the moment that this boss is actually a stand-in for God, if there's some kind of conflict between what's being taught, the Latin bit, the old style way of believing and thinking, versus the Mako Jumbis, who express a very different, though no less important, spiritual tradition. And my guess is that there is some kind of maybe reconfiguring or re-examining of belief systems and modes of behavior and thought on the dreamer's part, and as represented by a more pagan or kind of religion, as opposed to a very structured and very hidebound and rule-bound religion, as implied by these Latin rites. And that's what I've been able to kind of discern from all of this. But I'll as always, I'll be interested to find out what the dreamer thinks when the dreamer gets back to me. So there you have it. Stilt walking spirits, mafia bosses, and prison-like offices while on vacation. And maybe it could just simply be a call for the dreamer to get away from the ordinary and mundane, and try to look at things from a different perspective. There's also that possibility as well. And if you have, by chance, a dream that you really, really can't sort out, or is frightening the life out of you, or is like Groundhog Day, you keep having the same dream or variations of it, and would like to find out what you can do about it, you can always book a free 15-minute call with me. And so you can get some clues and tips as to how to approach your dream and perhaps make sense of it. And more importantly, get the information that it's trying to be communicated to you in it. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Have a great evening and rest of the week. And I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.